My diet is a participation in my culture actively. And I think there are certain things that require animal products. For an outsider to come in, and yes, though well-intentioned, it still could be seen as like neocolonialism in a way, as like an invading force coming in.
Hypothetically, if there was a culture that just like murdered 10-year-olds for fun, would you want to wait for people in those cultures to decide that that's wrong? Or would it be better for people from the outside to say like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that? What's up, everybody? Natalie here with Josue, and I'm with Allied Scholars for Animal Protection, and we had a sign that says, you can't say you love animals and eat them too. Changed my mind, and Josue very kindly sat down to talk about it. I want to make it clear this isn't like a debate, it's more like a discussion. So yeah, I'm curious, what are your thoughts about that?
So I had a really good friend who was vegan for a long time. Well, still is currently vegan. We always had really nice conversations about not morality, sustainability, different aspects if it came up. I think you can love animals and also eat them to an extent. Okay. There are certain things I find personally immoral, such as zoos. I don't know. That doesn't seem. I wouldn't want to be like in a cage.
You wouldn't want to be in a cage.
And the animals, obviously our level of intelligence isn't there, but still they have the same. There's still something there.
They're sentient, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The sentience of it. It's just like, I know, man. There's something there that doesn't seem right about zoos.
Sure. So I guess, it sounds like you're kind of on board with our prompt. Like, you don't think animals should be in zoos because you wouldn't want to be in a zoo. I love how you like really empathize with animals, recognize that they're sentient, they can feel and everything as well. So I'm curious, like, on what grounds do you disagree?
I don't think that it's like logistically possible to have all humanity like under veganism. And also there are certain animal products that I would argue are good for animals. For example, honey. Like that vegan friend, that was the only exception he made, was like honey, because of course, like the critical importance of bees and beekeeping is kind of helping them make sure that they're at least it's like a preserve, it's
sure. So the thing about honey, I think a lot of people don't realize is like, so honeybees are one type of the 270 types of bees.
Yeah.
Wild bees are essential to pollination, things like that. Honeybees directly compete with them and spread diseases to them. So by breeding so many honeybees to make honey, we're actually harming wild bee populations and hurting the environment and things like that. But I kind of want to keep this a bit more focused. You think that some practices are beneficial to animals, but what about the ones that aren't? Like the meat and dairy industry. Like, what do you think about that?
So the meat and dairy, especially cattle, I don't think anyone could argue, at least today, and they can't argue anymore, that it's sustainable. Especially all the methane that these dairy farms and like cattle ranches produce. Yeah. But at the same time, like to grow enough like plant-based food for the whole population would also take up as a lot of land. Maybe not as much, but.
So that's actually a really interesting point. So like we're talking about feeding the world, right? It's estimated that we could actually reduce global farmland by up to 75% if everyone went vegan. In addition to that, we could end world hunger with just the plant food fed to the farm animals in the U.S. So we would be able to feed way more people if everyone went vegan. And you're right. You brought up a point about how it's not realistic for everyone to go vegan. That's obviously true. But do you think that's relevant to like you and me, like the people who can go vegan? Does the fact that there are some people in the world who can't, is that relevant?
I would say that to an extent it is relevant, in the extent that it is possible for most people in developed nations to become vegan. My mom's from a really rural part in Mexico, and like there's more butcher shops than there are like produce markets. Like all the produce, they just kind of grow on their little patches of land, like squash and stuff like that. But majority of like their calories kind of come from like mostly chicken.
So what about you? Do you have the ability to go vegan?
Yeah, I could, for sure. Like I have those conversations with my vegan friend. Like I was just like, yeah, I'd be curious to try it out. I say like there's certain things that I personally would be like tough to like sacrifice. Like it's like meat, not so much. Like, I could probably go without it. But like the other products, like dairy and like eggs, are like tough.
Do you know why vegans don't consume dairy and eggs? Because that's not something I knew before.
Yeah, so I mean, it's basically like the same industrial complex that goes into dairy farming is just as bad as like as cattle ranching, and same thing with eggs. Like the chickens are also like they're constantly laying eggs, so it's just as much as a harm to like to kill them, to keep them alive for their resources.
And if you oppose zoos because animals are trapped, they're also trapped in the dairy, egg, and meat industry. So it sounds like you are interested in going vegan.
I mean, not so much, just because I think there's one of the arguments that I never really like making with him is like sort of the cultural aspect.
Absolutely, I think that's a very important thing to talk about.
And there's things that not so much like that certain cultures value life over others, but I think it's from the actual like food is an integral part of culture just as much as music, dress, language, religions, and I think to kind of like my diet is a participation in my culture actively, and I think there are certain things that require animal products, like a lot of cheese, for example, a lot of pork, a lot of and it sort of serves as like as a personal reminder of like where of an identity that I like to have.
So it's like kind of like identity, cultural thing. Yeah, I think that's like definitely a valid concern. I'm going to question the morality of that though. So like, do you think because something's cultural, does that make it moral?
I think it's a very, I don't want to use the word slippery slope just because a lot of people on the right use that to make dumb arguments, but it toes the line between one culture deciding what's appropriate for another culture. I think that there's, and that's happened so many times before. I mean, just in Latin America alone, it's like, the Spanish and the Portuguese came over and saw the local religions and the local practices of the natives and said, no, we don't agree with that. Yeah. The correct culture is this, and they kind of stripped them away, and now part of now the modern culture in Latin America is just like a blend of both.
I agree with you that like we shouldn't just have some cultures dictating what others do, but the thing that I think maybe is missing from your framework is that there are things like rights violations that occur in cultures, right? Like in some countries, it's illegal to be gay. So do you think like in those countries, should there be a gay rights movement to get rights for gay people, even though it goes against culture?
I mean, this is one of just a broader, not just in the sense of animals, but yeah, I mean, for sure, it definitely applies. I think that there are basic human rights, right? To the right to exist peacefully, the right to those things, and I think that's something that needs to happen within the culture itself. And a lot of the times, like in usually the countries where it's like illegal to be gay, that's suppressed just so that doesn't happen. Because for an outsider to come in, and yes, though well-intentioned, it still could be seen as like neocolonialism in a way, as like an invading force coming in.
Hypothetically, if there was a culture that just like murdered 10-year-olds for fun, would you want to wait for people in those cultures to decide that that's wrong, or would it be better for people from the outside to say like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that?
Well, I guess like in the sense of, back to like the indigenous people, they would have human sacrifices, and that was part of their culture, and that was part of their like way of life. And obviously with the lens of the modern day, it's not, you would think, okay, well, why would they do that? But we kind of like dig into it a little bit more, at least in the indigenous, like some of them, it was like considered an honor to die for their deities. In today's world, I mean...
So that it's consensual then, so that would be different than sacrificing someone who didn't want to die.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, like consent is kind of like the big one. But I mean, in a general sense, no, you probably shouldn't kill children.
Children?
Yeah.
Even if it's cultural and that culture does not want to get rid of the practice?
Well, I guess we should probably investigate why it is, because it's, depending on how like critical and how vital and how important it is to the other people. Like, would we like, because that would be sort of a lack of perspective, looking at, to play devil's advocate essentially, to see like, okay, well, why are they doing this? What are the origins of it? What's the personal importance of their everyday of doing that? And if we were to take that away, how much are we going to impact them? Are they going to like, we have to consider all the angles basically.
So let's say that it was really important to their identity. Would we permit them to just kill 10-year-olds who didn't want to die to respect their culture?
Well, then we have to consider, okay, well, what is it? What's the negativity? Like, what are we? Let's say it is, yeah. Let's say it is like critical, and like if we do that, we take away a massive part of their own identity. And I guess we'll have to play the villain for an extent and be like, listen, like this is for the world abroad. This is not correct. We're gonna have to stop this. We're gonna have to do this, that, the other. These are our rules. These are our tenets. You'll have to follow them. We'll try our best to not insult you.
Sure. Yeah, I think maybe we could agree that we should kind of look through the victim's perspective, right? Like we should consider the 10-year-olds a bit more than like cultural practices. But in terms of eating animals, there are so many ways to veganize the dishes that are cultural, like paneer or whatever. Have you heard of that? Okay, well, it's like roasted pork shoulder or something. There's a way to make that out of plants. So you're not losing these cultural foods. You're just changing what they're made of. They still taste great as well. But even if you have to get rid of them, like my point is that culture doesn't justify harming others who don't want to be harmed. It sounds like you kind of agree with that.
To an extent, like I said,
Yeah.
there's certain on the cultural aspect. There's also certain things that like kind of serve as a reminder of where we came from. For example, I know in soul food, like chitlins are like and like pig's feet are like a really big like they're like gross to like an outsider, but like it's a cultural thing. And the same thing also exists, at least in the Mexican foods that I've eaten. Like you eat like intestines of animals, you eat like their feet, like, and then you have to consider like why are we eating this? And it comes from us being like from the soul food, like from the days of slavery, and then the indigenous people being like second, third class citizens and saying, well, they can't get the choice cut of meat, they can't get the good parts, they have to get what the butcher throws away, the scraps. And there's an example of like where we came from, and like it's still part of us.
The point that I want to make with that I think is really important is that these animals that we eat currently, chickens, pigs, cows, they're not even native to North America. So if you want to make the indigenous argument, I would say you have to go back further to where these animals didn't even exist on this country. And animal agriculture, the colonizers came, they took land from the indigenous people. They're still doing that in Brazil. So by paying for animal products, you're kind of harming indigenous cultures. But like even if it were important to their culture, like do you think that you can justify taking the life of animals for someone to just feel connected to their culture? Like at that point you're kind of putting human feelings above animal lives.
Well, I mean, yeah, essentially, because we have this is why I think humans are even capable of considering becoming vegan, because like evolutionary, we're omnivores. That's why our teeth are a certain way. That's why, but we're now in the modern day through science and through like we have the opportunity and the choice to go only plant-based, whereas like wild animals, they can't, we can't make a tiger only, like it would die. And like, but that's the advantage that we have. But I think it still goes, but because of that, because of our raised, like we have obviously we have higher intelligence in our emotional range. Because of our intelligence, it can be a bit more is higher. So therefore, not to say that we're superior to animals, because in a way we're also part of the animal kingdom, but as conscious beings, I think we should we have the option to kind of weigh things. And in just even the conversation we're having here, like obviously, this is part of that. And I think that if we sometimes have to put the benefit of humans over the benefit of animals.
Sure. A couple things there. So I love how you say that, we shouldn't hold ourselves to the same moral standard as wild animals, right? Because they don't have a choice. We do. We're smarter. We have the option to choose to make moral decisions. And that's one of the arguments I use in favor of veganism, because if we have the choice to cause mass suffering to animals, or the choice to not, wouldn't it be more moral to not? But I also think that the power that we have as humans grants us responsibility to do what's best for the world. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. That's kind of the, I think that right there is the core of a lot of arguments, not just with this. Yeah. But we have a responsibility to not only the planet, but to other humans to kind of make the best choices for all. And And again, that's kind of like the core of it. Like we're at an opportunity. We have an opportunity
Yeah.
to benefit everybody, and
Yeah.
it's sometimes we have to make decisions that'll hurt others, and even like in other, I guess in either way, someone's going to be harmed, whether it's an animal, whether it's a human, like not so much a physical sense, but sort of like an internal sense of just like, okay, well, I can no longer do this, I can no longer do that. Certain like cultures would be different, like barbecue would be different, like
Yeah. But they could still barbecue a lot of stuff. Just it doesn't have to be animals, I think, is the point that I want to make. Like, there's no need for us to consume animal products anymore. So to me, that kind of takes away the moral justification, because there have been times through history where we needed to do it. You know, where, like you said, we're omnivores, we're opportunistic eaters, really. Mm-hmm. But do you think the fact that like we are able to eat animals, does that make it moral?
I mean, like I said, to an extent, like we shouldn't have like the industrial complex that there is. There shouldn't be these massive like cattle ranches the size of, you know, like 5 city blocks. There shouldn't, even bigger. There shouldn't be. It has to be more sustainable, more like friendly to the environment, like.
Sure. So I do want to separate environmental from morality, but I just kind of want to show you that that's not necessarily possible, because as bad as industrial farming is, it is better for the environment than these like local farms, because the animals on those farms live for longer, they consume more resources, they emit more gas, and they take up more land that we need. So it's kind of like we either have the really bad ethic, which is still unsustainable anyway. But I want to separate sustainability from morality, because like we can agree that it'd probably be pretty sustainable to kill 3 billion humans, but does that make it moral?
Well, I think we should only get to a certain population before things get just get out of hand. But like, I'm not Thanos over here and say let's get rid of a random population. That's something we like. Well, the government, we don't have much of a choice as far as government, but like,
Yeah.
that's kind of for them to kind of say, well, we should kind of limit this stuff, but no, yeah, we shouldn't kill 3 billion people for the sake of sustainability.
So we can celebrate sustainability from morality was my only goal. Okay, great. So what would stop you from saying, all right, I want to live in alignment with my values, that like, I don't think animals should be abused. I oppose industrial farming, which I will say makes up over 99% of farming in the U.S. What would stop you from just like going vegan, you know, learning more about it? Maybe it's easier than you thought. That's the case for me. What would stop you from that?
Well, mostly like the accessibility of it, and just the overall cost. Just because when you go to like Wheatsville, Whole Foods, like even Target, like all these big places, like they kind of like overcharge you for like vegan products. At least I've noticed it, and so I think it's just cheaper to just have a garden in the backyard, but not everyone has a garden. Yeah. Not everyone has a backyard. So like from that perspective, it was like, how is this like economically for me personally? So
you're worried that it might be more expensive?
I think that it's more essentially and more expensive, not just for the raw material, but for like the already processed foods, like and like even like vegan restaurants. I mean, some of them are like, I guess vegan restaurants is like they're pretty on par with prices.
Yeah, it certainly depends. The thing, like, I always thought veganism was more expensive, and I was shocked because I was like, I'm spending less money. What's going on? I looked it up. There was this study that came out in 2021. It showed that plant-based diets are 30% cheaper than omnivore diets. Mm-hmm. So, like, yeah, when you think about vegan food, you think, like, Beyond Meat, Impossible Meat, but you forget all the naturally vegan foods that are super cheap, you know, potatoes, beans, rice, Oreos, peanut butter, all that kind of stuff is just naturally vegan. So if cost is a concern for you, then you should actually go vegan because it is cheaper. But accessibility, I think, might be more of a factor. And I think that a lot of people don't realize how accessible it is because they're not necessarily looking for options. Every dining hall on this campus has at least one vegan option for every single meal. Mm-hmm. But you may not necessarily know that unless you're looking for it. Yeah. So if cost and accessibility, you find out that's easier, then would you go vegan? Because you said you would earlier, so now I'm testing it.
Yeah, no worries. No, probably not, just because like it's a very, because for the following argument, it's very subjective, but like just to the overall like taste of it, like vegan, like I've had vegan cheese because I was like okay, well, like I really like cheese, and like I'll try vegan cheese and it just doesn't like just doesn't like taste the same, and like such a I don't know, eye in the beholder kind of thing. But yeah.
So it'd be taste. Vegan cheese. Some of it's really good. Some of it's really bad. It's also come a long way. But let's say the taste is different. Like taste is a sense, like sight, smell, sound. Do you think sensory pleasure can justify what we do to animals?
Well, the sensory organs are. It's as far as I think taste goes far beyond more than just like. It's a part of the human experience in a way. Even go I like to go on hikes, and like it's not just I'm not just simply walking. I'm also like hearing like the wind, the birds. I'm seeing the trail ahead of me. I'm seeing the trees, and I'm smelling like the clean air and like just like the natural, like some breeze brings in like a smell from the forest. So it goes beyond that. So I think.
What if I said like, oh, I really like hiking and I love smelling dead animals, and I love hearing animals being murdered, therefore that's okay when I'm hiking. Do you think that argument would hold up?
I'd probably think there's like a wild animal nearby, like a predator. I was like, I should probably get out of Dodge. But if it's like another person.
But let's say I enjoyed it and I wanted people to murder animals around me because I liked the sounds and the smells. Do you think that would be a good justification?
Well, that would be psychopathy, and I think that's generally that's something we avoid as psychopaths. But like. Yeah, no, I wouldn't enjoy the sound of dying animals.
Sure, but let's say I did, because the argument you're making is that you enjoy the taste, therefore it's justified, but you don't think that holds up with other senses. So it seems like there's an inconsistency there.
Well, that's sort of yeah, in a way it is an inconsistency, but I think that's why the taste argument is such a weak argument to stand on, because like it's a personal experience, and like we can't it's borderline anecdotal, and anecdotal evidence is always the weakest form of evidence.
Absolutely,
yeah.
and we wouldn't accept it for any other form of violence. We wouldn't say like, oh, I loved beating someone, it felt good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think taste is a fairly weak argument, although I do understand that that's where a lot of people are coming from in regard to this. But I do want to make the point again that there's really good vegan food now. Like maybe it wasn't as good 10 years ago, whatnot, but now like I don't miss meat or anything. Most vegans I know don't as well. So we kind of got rid of accessibility, cost, and taste. So then what else would keep you from going vegan?
Personally, I guess it would be like the social aspect of it. For example, like with that vegan friend, we wanted to go out to eat. We could really only go to one or two places, and
that's not true.
like at least the places we wanted to go to eat. Like Kirby Lane was like, I freaking love Kirby Lane, and like that was like the one place he would always go to. And then like he would bring up like other spots, and like anyways, like, we wanted to go out to eat. We had to like look ahead at the menu, and then they would kind of like. We didn't want to ostracize them, of course. Like it's in your social circle. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But just from the social, like if anyone like says, oh, we're doing this, we're going out to eat, and I look ahead of the menu, I'm like, oh, they don't have any vegan options. They don't have any vegetarian options. Like, I'll just drink some water or something. But yeah, just sort of the social aspect and like.
The social aspect can be more difficult for some people than others. I don't find it very difficult. I actually think it's an honor to be able to stand up for animals in that situation. Like say I'm somewhere where there's no vegan option, which has only happened to me once ever, by the way, and I go to a lot of different restaurants, pretty much everywhere, especially in Austin. Most places have really good vegan options, but then that gets people to think, right? Because when you're consuming this stuff with them, you're saying, oh, factory farming's fine, oh, killing animals is fine, let's culturally do this. But the more vegans there are, that's going to change that social dynamic. But like, what do you think is harder? Like you choosing different restaurants with your friends, or like an animal going through a slaughterhouse?
Well, obviously the slaughterhouse. That's kind of where yeah.
And do you think that's a perspective you should consider?
I think the ultimate. Hold on, I'm gonna make one last argument before I have to get going.
Sure.
But I think it is something to consider, but I think the bigger thing to consider is how, because of the industrial like farming complex, how massive it is. I think that realistically,
don't feel like you could make a difference?
Exactly, yeah, because like let's say
I totally understand that.
because like you have these big cattle ranchers and like they'll lobby against it, and sure you have other people lobbying for the rights of the animals, but all of a sudden it's like, hey, we raised enough money, we canvassed enough, we have X amount of signatures, we have X amount of donations. Like, people can just buy a politician, and then like.
Here, let me cut in. So the main argument you're making, unless I misunderstood you, is that you don't think that it really would make a difference even if you went vegan.
Yeah, essentially, like we can.
I have a response to that. So first of all, there are people who study this, right? And the numbers are a little bit fuzzy, but they found that every person going vegan saves somewhere between 30 to 600 animals per year, right? So that's like, let's say around 200. So if you looked out, you saw 200 animals, and you knew they didn't have to be tortured and abused and killed because of you. Do you think that's a difference?
Yeah, but ultimately, let's say in 10 years, like the number of vegans doubles, triples, quintuples.
Yeah.
And then like Tyson and all these other big corporations see that, and it's okay, well, this is affecting our bottom line. Let's invest, and then they'll just have like counter, like maybe not even that. They might just say, well, is it cheaper? Like, I guess that. I don't know if it would be cheaper to produce like
Clean meat.
Lab-grown meat. That's the word. That was like lab-grown meats and stuff. Like,
I think it will be at some point. But yeah, the main thing I want to get across to you now is that it does make a difference. Every person going vegan does make a difference. And we have studies on that to support that. In addition, the important thing that I think of is shifting the culture, because it's pretty ingrained in our culture to eat meat right now, but that's changing.
Yeah.
And the more people that go vegan, the more it'll change quicker. And then it'll, it's better for the animals, the environment, like you said. And since you already don't think that animals should be in zoos, like things like that. We do have power as individuals, and that's, part of why I'm here is I'm exercising my power and encouraging others to exercise theirs as well. Yeah. But yeah, I really appreciated this discussion. I guess I've got one last question for you. Sure. If you could live a life where you intentionally harmed humans, intentionally harmed animals, or neither, what would you choose?
I mean, hopefully everyone chooses neither, right?
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, you have that choice every day. If you go vegan, you can do your best to not harm animals or humans. All right, thank you so much. I'll give you some more information. Let's cut it here. If you want to support my work while donating to animal rights organizations, join my Patreon today. This month we donated $81 to Rowdy Girl Sanctuary.